Hi everyone, and welcome to the SEO Kitchen Show, the SEO webinar series where SEO cooks from around the world will debate in fiery discussions to balance out the flavors of their recipes and hopefully come up with the best SEO tips for their audience. I'm Thomas Carmona, I'll be your host today, and please welcome our SEO cooks of episode 6, Algorithm Update Layer Cake. We have with us Cindy Krum, Chris Long, and Koray Tuğberk GÜBÜR. Well, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. And Cindy, if you want to go first.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cindy Krum, and I'm the CEO of Mobile Moxie, based in Denver, Colorado. We do mobile SEO and ASO consulting, and we have the first mobile-oriented tool set. So I'm excited to be here.
Great. Koray, Chris.
Yep, I can continue if you want. And my name is Koray Tuğberk GÜBÜR. I am the owner and founder of Holistic SEO and Digital, and we try to focus on every vertical of search engine optimization. That's why I called it Holistic SEO. And it gets harder after every Google update or every year. And we try our best to keep up with their performance. And that's it. Happy to be here.
Yep, and I'll round it out. I'm Chris Long, VP of Marketing at Go Fish Digital. We're a full-service digital marketing agency based out of Raleigh, North Carolina, specializing in SEO, PPC, digital PR, and content, web design, and development. Very excited to be talking about algorithm update changes, as it's a question, we're always analyzing and getting asked about from our clients. So excited to dive deep here.
Well, that's perfect. Before we start kicking out with the questions, as you guys may know, Bill Slawski was originally going to be part of today's episode. So we just wanted to take a second to say we are immensely saddened to learn his passing, as he was a mentor and friend to many people in the industry and for you guys. We'd like to take just a quick moment to remember him, and I think that, Chris, you wanted to share a few words.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. I had the pleasure of working with Bill for the better part of 6 years. Ever since I came to Go Fish Digital, Bill was already our director of SEO research at that point, and he was instrumental in guiding my career and showing me best practices in search. But not only that, but like analyzing where search is going through his work, through his patents. I can speak for myself and anyone on the team. Whenever they had a question, about one of Bill's patents or about SEO in general, Bill was extremely generous with his time. That's one of the things I'll always remember most about him. It's how generous he was and how passionate he was about not withholding his learnings, but spreading it to the team, sharing it with the team at large. I still use a lot of his work today. The reasonable surfer model, information gain scores, all crucial components of what makes up SEO today. So my mind, Bill was a legend and a pioneer in the SEO community, and he'll be greatly missed here.
Koray, if you also want to add something, I think you did.
Of course, I want to. First of all, if accidentally I wouldn't click onto the SEObythesea.com like 6 years ago, probably I wouldn't be able to create my own company. I wouldn't be able to create my own SEO case studies. And when it comes to the Bill Slawski, I am a little emotional because he changed my life, to be honest. And I have even created a tribute for him, and I called him Charles Darwin of the search engines, because he was innovating everything. He was making a research for every teeny tiny thing. And when he was with us, I always felt that we are protected, because whatever the search engine does, Bill was there for learning and also sharing. He always said that sharing is the caring, and he continued to share the richest information ever. And now, to be honest, for the future, I'm also a little scared and feel a little alone in terms of innovation, because even if I am, in a way, educated by Bill Slawski, still, I can't read these things as he does, because he was like a human database for the search engines. He knew everything, basically, and I miss him a lot. And I believe that he lives in the clicks, millions or billions of clicks that every users perform, because there are many SEOs who follow his lead. And it makes me happy to think that his effect lives with us. And it's the only thing that I can find a little happiness, at least when I remember him.
Beautiful. Cindy, do you want to also have a few words, maybe?
Just quickly, yes. Everything that Koray and Chris said is so true. Bill was a legend and he was a friend, and I was devastated when I heard the news. And he'll be missed greatly. It's really, he's irreplaceable, and it was very sad. So that's all I had to say.
Well, I thank you all. Again, he was supposed to be there, so we thought it was normal for us to pay a tribute. And let's move to the questions, right, and the topic of today. Everyone listening, watching, feel free to use the hashtag SEO Kitchen Show and ask any question at any time in the question box. There will be a Q&A session, and our panel will be glad to try to answer those. For the first question, how do you know when an algorithm update is occurring? And since we know there are millions of updates per year, how do you know when one is significant?
Sure. So I can hop in and answer. So in terms of how you know when an algorithm update is occurring, I mean, there are updates that Google announces well in advance, right? You know, the mobile speed update, the Core Web Vitals updates. So Google sometimes will, you know, give us insight. Hey, a year down the line, a year and a half, we plan on rolling out this feature, making Core Web Vitals, you know, integrated into the algorithm. I would say for those updates, when it's announced, they tend to be like less significant, right? Generally, there'll be an update and then the data will play out, and then you'll look across rankings and say, hey, things didn't really change that much after the announced updates. The broad core updates, they're unannounced, but generally have a lot bigger impact. Those broad core updates are generally the ones where you're going to see the biggest shakeups, you're going to see the biggest variations in visibility, and those will be generally unannounced, right? In terms of signs that one could be coming, some things we'll generally lean on will be a couple of different variables. One, has a significant amount of time passed between the last update, right? Once you're approaching around that, if it's been 6 months, that might be a good proxy to know, hey, they might start considering doing another core update. Not a hard rule, but once it gets to that point, it seems to be a more fair game. As well, a lot of times there'll be, what they call tremors, right? In Mozcast or Rank Ranger, SEMrush tracker, whatever tracker you're using. Oftentimes you'll see tremors before the update is actually fully rolled out. So if you know that combination of time between updates and search tremors is something we'll kind of lean on to see, hey, is an algorithm update around the corner?
Koray, indeed. Do you want to add something? It was pretty explicit.
Okay, I can jump in. So to be able to understand that whether an update is occurring or not, you can also compare the search engines to each other, because every ranking change might not signal an update. Maybe your competitor changed something, and that's why you are also being affected from that. And usually, if you see that there is a velocity in the Google, but everything is calmed down in the Microsoft Bing, it is actually a clear signal. I usually actually compare them to each other to see that which one is actually changing something. And if there is an update, most of the time, the search engine starts to crawl more. So if you see more crawl requests from the search engine, it might be an early signal as well. And sometimes it might be misleading too, because whenever Google Chrome has been updated, again, the Googlebot starts to make more requests too. So sometimes it is an update for the browser or the crawlers itself, just for the user agent, not just for the algorithm. But at the same time, if you see fundamental changes like SERP features, if they start to remove certain types of SERP features and bring the new ones, and if they start to change all of the auto suggestions or related search terms, it means that actually they have restructured their relevance understanding, because all of the related suggestions changed. And at the same time, if you start to see different types of websites for certain types of queries based on maybe just a web page layout or maybe just the inclusive language. For example, lately they have published an episode in the Search After Record podcast just for the inclusiveness. Then other day, the Google blog, they also posted something about booking.com, and they explained how they help for LGBT people. And just today, again, from the Search Liaison or somewhere, they have published one more thing about web inclusiveness. So we had web security, we had web accessibility, now we also have the web inclusiveness. So when we think about these explanations, and also when we think about the crawl rates and the ranking changes, and when we compare the search engines to each other, we can understand when it is happening, why it is happening, and what possibly they can actually target here. I can tell that.
I'll just chime in that I totally agree. Chris and Koray did a great job of explaining and answering the question. And from my perspective, I just want to say that I think it's sort of a rookie mistake when young SEOs will just call anything an algorithm update. That's kind of a cop-out, and usually it's not really accurate necessarily. So if you lose rankings, that doesn't mean there was necessarily an algorithm update. That just means something changed in the search results. And like Chris said, there are usually tremors ahead of time. There's sometimes official announcements way in advance, or at least on the day that it starts rolling out, and official announcements when it's done rolling out. And unless you're seeing the changes happening across a lot of industries, or in the things like the Modcast and Rank Ranger and all of the SERP tracking utilities, then it might just be that your competitor did something, or maybe something went wrong on your website. So just make sure that you're not calling everything an algorithm update. And sometimes, Google does tests. And I think that one, if they're testing a new type of SERP feature, something like that, that's not necessarily an algorithm update either. It's just a test. But I think that's where it gets fuzzy. If they've introduced this new thing to rank, is that an algorithm update, or is it just something, a new tweak to the algorithm? That's where you get, into nuance of what is and isn't an algorithm update. But in general, everyone is going to notice an algorithm update, and there's going to be huge buzz on Twitter. So that's the first place I go if I see something happening.
And by the way, Cindy, you actually have a great article series for reading the updates. It was entity indexing. I guess it was 6 articles of series, or 5 maybe. I can tell that it was really educational for me, and I guess it was 3 years ago or something. I was reading it even while I am in the metro or somewhere. I was always reading it. I can tell it is a really great example actually for understanding the updates, because you were taking like 6-7 years of change of Google, and you were connecting every that to each other, not just in terms of search, but also Focusya, for example, their operational system design, or the TV usage for YouTube or streaming or everything. Actually, they can be connected to each other. And if anyone wants to see that example, they can actually check that article too. It was a really good educational example.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I think it's a good way to think about Google in terms of the larger story. These algorithm updates and changes that they make are part of a larger effort. And sometimes the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing at Google. Sometimes things are discoordinated, but usually they fit into some kind of larger narrative of what Google's trying to accomplish and where they're headed for the long term. And so I think stepping back and looking at the big picture like that article series does is useful. So thank you. I'm glad you like that one.
Always.
So that's what I call expertise sharing. That's cool. I'm going to move to the second question, and you'll see that some of the other questions we prepared have been partially addressed. So maybe we'll skip 1 or 2. Second one will be, what sort of things are impacted, aside from rankings, obviously, by search engine algorithm updates?
Chris, you can start, I believe.
Sure. So one thing we see commonly impacted by algorithm updates. So there's a variety of things that can be updated. It can be just like straight visibility rankings. A couple of things we've seen that I believe Glenn Gabe has also written about. So he's another great resource for these algorithm updates. Shifts in intent, that definitely happens where as the algorithm gets smarter and tries to better understand what users are really looking for in the search results, it can update intent throughout its algorithm updates. One of my favorite examples of this is if you look at historical rankings for a term like sofas, back in 2018, it was like all the usual suspects like Raymore and Flanagan and Wayfair and Joybird and like all of these, standard companies. Now, when you take a look at that same query, it's all like affiliate sites. What are the 10 best sofas? What are the best sectionals? The best ones for napping? The algorithm update often changes intent when these updates happen. That's something that we commonly see is these kind of intent shifts that are happening over time. In e-com, we see it a lot too. Things that used to be mapped to category pages are now mapped to these like listicle style of articles. That's one thing that changes, where your content that might have been ranking might not rank anymore, not because it's not any good, but because Google is shifting the intent on you. Another thing we've seen is, especially this happens with larger sites with a lot of content written, where they might have been getting traffic for queries that might not be super related to the site or the overall core service offerings or value proposition, whatever the case is. Sometimes we'll see with algorithm updates, those sites that kind of rank for queries beyond their initial scope or expertise, they'll lose visibility for those queries. So it almost, in other words, it's you were ranking for queries that you shouldn't have been ranking for in the first place, or it was a very loose tie-in, and Google decides to find more niche, more experts, or sites with just stronger content in that area. That's something we've commonly seen with a lot of these updates, where a site was ranking for a wide variety of queries that really weren't super relevant. A lot of times it's mapped to blog content, and then the algorithm update happens and you see clicks and impressions shrink for that type of content specifically.
I'll jump in and say sometimes Google makes mistakes during the rollout of an update, and weird things get into the search results temporarily. And that's when you know there's been some kind of core change, like when there's all of a sudden XML sitemaps are ranking on page 1, which happened as recently as a year or two ago. And pages that have been removed are back in all of a sudden. And just weird things pop in. And usually what happens is, that's when there's a core update and Google's kind of overlooked some minor mistake. Those things get back in and then quickly are pushed back down, because the thing with algorithms is it's a math equation that's progressive. It's not a snapshot. And so sometimes things need to regain some traction, or need to be pushed out from bad engagement and stuff like that, or lots of pogo sticking. Controversial topics sometimes, but when you see weird stuff like an XML sitemap ranking on page 1, I don't know, have you guys seen that before? Do you remember seeing that with some of the updates?
Yeah, I remember. And if I also explain, I believe the list of things that are impacted by a search engine algorithm update, it is a really long list, like human history, because if we'll just check the weather state, let's say you are a Google search engine engineer and you need to just update a couple of things for the local search, and you just focus on the weather. And let's say you need to decide that after what Celsius or Fahrenheit, I don't know the American metric system that much, but let's say after what certain unit of degree, we will assume that the weather is good. And if someone searches for things to do in New York City, and according to the New Yorkers, what is a good weather? And when we focus on there, after 18 centigrade or 19 centigrade, you might assume that weather is good. So I should bring some of the other types of places in front of the users. And another day, you can assume that actually 19 degrees is not good enough. Let's make it 21. And for sunny days, we can suggest these places. For rainy days, for snowy days, we can suggest these places. So even the weather can affect actually the rankings. And if it is a factor or it is a kind of reflection of the rankings, it means that they will need to tweak it too. So weather or just even the climate or the mood of the user or anything actually can be configured there. And if we assume that Google actually tries to be your life coach, I believe they will need to tweak many other things, because they even know every people in your contact list, and they even know the faces of people that stays in your Google Photos. So if you think like that, I guess the search engine engineers, they try to impact every angle of our lives by optimizing the ambience around us. But if you think about from just ranking the web pages, from that point of view, they can try to balance different types of ranking factors or the signals, like the page rank or different types of page rank. We have rank merge, we have even aristocratic page rank, which is another concept. We also have, as Chris already said, reasonable surfer model and different types of page ranks. If you just look at the relevance, there are many other types of relevance algorithms too. And even if you just tweak a single thing, it means that millions of query results will change. So if we think like that, I believe everything will be affected from that. But I guess the fundamentals, they don't change that much. Even if the devices change, even if we change, usually the fundamentals of the search, they stay same, but we are able to understand these fundamentals better. That's what I can tell.
The other thing, going through like the ambiance of the search result and off of what Chris said about query intent changing or being reclassified, it can change not just the type of web page that ranks, for instance, going from a category page to a listicle or an affiliate list, but it can also change what Google decides to include. If they think that something has gone from an informational query to a shopping query, then they're more likely to add in PLAs and more images and stuff like that, versus if they think that the intent is more informational, then they might be more likely to add an answer or a featured snippet, or people also ask, or found on the web, or all of those new things that they're adding in. But then the other thing is, I've been encouraging people to look at the things that Google is adding towards the bottom of the search result, because it's changing a lot recently and it's getting a lot less attention because most users don't get to the bottom. But I think that what happens is, if Google assumes that if someone's gotten to the bottom, then they haven't found what they wanted or something that was compelling enough to click on. And so they're trying to get the feedback there. And the way that Google is doing this recently, and I mean in the past 3 months, 4 months, is that they're adding different kinds of suggestions about query refinements. So they say, do you want to refine this query this way? Or do you want to broaden this query? Or here are some other things that people, related topics, and people also searched for. And all of these different kind of phrases that basically mean, we think that your query sucked. It wasn't very good. It wasn't clear enough. And so it's like, when you searched for that, what did you really mean? What really looking for, because you're down here at the bottom and you didn't find it. And so I think that speaks to overall Google's desire to have a more linguistically advanced understanding of a query, rather than just keyword matching. You know, this big path that Google is on is to have more conversational responses, because I think in the long run they care about digital assistants and stuff like that. And you really see that playing out at the bottom of the search result when they're saying, when you said this, what did you really mean? Because that's how a Google Assistant and a voice search kind of query would need more information. And so they want to play those out of, did you mean A, B, or C? Because that's how it would play out in a voice query if the assistant needed to refine.
And just to piggyback on that, one last time, but I think you said you had a great point of Google with these algorithm updates. One of the big things is trying to really understand the context of text, really, and like how people are utilizing it. Going back to one of my favorite articles by Bill, he talks about the concept of, hey, when Google's trying to analyze the concept of Jaguar, right? Part of the updates are trying to figure out how to better classify that term. Like a Jaguar, could be the football team, or it could be a car, or it could be the actual animal itself. And Google, with these updates like BERT, integrating that more into the algorithm, right? What it's really doing is trying to better understand, hey, what is the text in this article? Is this an article about the football team? Is it an article about the car? What is the context of this query? And how can we better properly serve the proper results based on the user input, and better able to tell when a user means the football team or the car or the animal. That's a big part of these algorithms, is getting a better natural language understanding of what's going on and being able to better interpret content that's already been talking about those concepts.
Okay, so I think we have got what is definitely rich content. I'm gonna skip the next one because basically it was what you guys addressed previously on how to define if some changes we perceive are due to an algorithm or core update or not. And checking at the time, I would like maybe to have more emphasis on the next one. What can you do to prepare, apart from mental preparation, and recover from being impacted by an algorithm update?
Yeah, so I think, my first advice always is, I truly believe that if you are creating good content, if you are optimizing for the end result of what Google's trying to do, which is serve the most comprehensive content, the content that answers a query most completely to a user, you're on the right track. So I think there is this natural inclination, once again, especially for people who are maybe a little less experienced in the industry, to, hey, an algorithm update happened. Maybe we weren't on the positive end of it, and let's just completely throw out our old strategy and refine. I think it's okay to make some small adjustments and some small tweaks, but I think, my big thing to prepare for future algorithm updates and, recover from old ones is if your strategy is going for the same goal of providing the best content possible that answers something completely, you're on the right track. Maybe this algorithm update didn't favor you, but if you were continuing with that mission, at the end of the day, in the long term, in the 1 year time frame, the 5 year time frame, you're much more likely to see success. So that's one of my big call outs. But I think, in terms of preparation or recovery, I think one thing I've seen is EAT come into more and more play. Like I was maybe an EAT skeptic back in 2018, but I've since changed my tune. I believe that sites that are actually identifying, like making sure they have expert content and signaling that they're expert and trusted sources, time and time again, we see those sites come out on the positive end of algorithm updates, right? That's why you see sites like Healthline do such aggressive EAT optimizations. Lily Ray frequently references whattoexpect.com. They do a phenomenal job and end up, as a result, generally coming out on the positive end of these types of things. I think really ensuring your experts are writing the content, reviewing it, and then also importantly, you're signaling that they are experts. That is one of the better ways to future-proof your site for algorithm updates. It's not a silver bullet by any means, but I think it's something that can potentially mitigate the effects and put you in a much better position than competitors.
And from my point of view, actually, I can tell that maybe it is a coincidence too, but I have published my first international SEO case study in Oncrawl, and in the blog there are 2 articles for the broad core algorithm updates, and it was one of the 4 websites in Turkey, the biggest financial website actually in Turkey, and there to be able to optimize the website, always I have chosen a possible core algorithm update date. Then I have started to actually analyze all of the websites, and I try to understand what Google actually focused on more. And then I have started to even distribute quality rater guidelines inside of the company to the until to the CEO or to the least important person. Then I started to give a kind of SEO culture so that they can also think like the search engine and they can understand what's going on or what possibly can be. Because when you are in such a situation, if you are an in-house SEO, I can tell that you will have a heavy burden. But if you start to educate everyone, and if you also tell them that whenever you see a weird result or any result that Google gives, but you don't agree with Google, just come to me and explain it so that I can make a research and it can actually save us. And I have collected many, many different types of feedbacks from every employee, and the employee count was actually higher than 60, by the way. And then when I gathered all these things, before 5 or 6 months, we started to optimize everything. And for the at least 4 different broad core algorithm updates, we have won all of them, and we have dominated the niche. Still, it is in that way. So if you want to use these updates as a strategy point, you should actually choose a possible next update date, and you should also choose a possible next update target, what they will focus on and in what way. If you're able to do that, after a point, actually, you will be quicker than your competitors because you are already optimizing for the next possible algorithms or next possible perception of the Google search engine. And while your competitors try to understand what's going on, you already have a website that has been optimized according to that. I can tell that.
Yeah, I totally agree. The way I think about core updates is if I'm working with clients that are doing a good job, that are taking recommendations and taking the right actions, then we shouldn't sweat it, really. We should already have, like Koray said, have a plan and understand what's going on and what might change or what's likely to change. And something that we think about in terms of preparing, and when we're at Mobile Moxie internally talking about it, we talk about what is Google talking about? What does Google seem to care about a lot? What has Google released or launched or changed recently that might be impacted by this algorithm update? Because things like big research projects where Google does one big research project and they put it out in Google Think and it's about shopping or mobile shopping or something like that. Well, they've put a lot of time and effort into researching this for a reason. They wanted to answer questions that they had internally, or they wanted to answer questions that users or businesses had. And when they take that, when they have that learning, they would hopefully use it. Same thing when they announced what they call speakable schema. No one talks about speakable schema as a group. We talk about FAQ, how-to, and Q&A schema, but those are under the heading of speakable. And there's probably a reason for that, right? They call it speakable schema because it's about being able to understand and respond to not just written queries, but also spoken queries. And Google needed us to feed them this schema so that they could better respond with actual answers that were a meaningful match. And so when Google makes a change and says, here's new schema that we're recognizing or rewarding, especially if they're rewarding it by giving you some kind of different presentation in the search result, know that there's a reason that they want to reward you. It's kind of like a trade. They're going to trade you a better, different, more exciting visual impact in a search result because it's something that they want. And likely, if they're not already rewarding it other than visually with the way the ranking looks, they will at some point soon probably be rewarding it with also an improvement in your numeric ranking.
All great. We have like 2 questions left, which I mean, the last one will be like a one choice per person because it's going to be about where to get the info regarding changes and updates. But the next question is interesting in my opinion. Are there been any changes to how algorithm updates impact websites specifically?
I'll jump in here since I just finished talking. I'll just keep talking for a second. I think that Google has at least to some degree tried to make the changes a little bit less of a smackdown than they used to be. It used to be today was good or yesterday was good and today is horrible, or yesterday was horrible and today is much better. You know, and now the rollout takes a little bit more time. And it's a little bit softer because I think the signals have to accrue or accumulate over time a little bit more than just they've changed the math, you know, and you were here and now you're here. Now it's more of a slower burn where even though Google says we're launching it today and it'll be done rolling out on this day, that doesn't mean the changes are done changing. That means that it's been rolled out in all of the data centers, but the changes in the math that they do could still be accruing. And so that makes it a softer and less steep change in your analytics.
So we've moved to potentially disruptive to progressive changes and more nuance than it could have been before. Koray, Chris?
From my point of view, yes, certain algorithms actually can affect certain websites in certain ways. For example, in one day, you can lose all of the featured snippets. In another day, you can just lose all of the queries for certain types of concepts or topics. If you wait one more day, let's say you are appearing just for the image packs more than before. So all these things can be in certain ways. And when it comes to especially the web answers or the featured snippets, let's say, it is a little more complicated too, because after broadcast algorithm update, I can tell that the structure of the featured snippets or maybe the websites that are being preferred by the search engine, or the shapes or the structure of the questions or generated questions by the search engine, they can also be refreshed too. So it is one of the things that I especially focus on in terms of semantic SEO. But besides that, you can see certain types of impacts for the websites, and especially in the news industry, you can start to take many clicks from just discover suddenly, or suddenly you can lose all of them too. So that's why when it comes to SEO, I always tell that Google is a little ruthless and you shouldn't take it like as a joke, because it's a serious thing. You can destroy your business accidentally if it relies on organic traffic only. And especially in the YML industry and also the Google News, these type of algorithm updates, they should be read and remembered with higher level of attention. I would suggest that.
Chris, do you want to add a word on this question specifically?
Yeah, definitely. I think Cindy and Koray both made very, very strong points. So I'm actually gonna take a different route with this question. I think it is when a site gets hit with an update, it's often, hey, what are we doing wrong? What do we need to fix on our own site? Where are the errors on our end? Sometimes that is the case. Do not get me wrong. But sometimes I think people aren't giving competitors enough credit too. It's a zero-sum game, right? So it's not always the case if an algorithm update is punishing you, but sometimes an algorithm update is just rewarding a competitor, right? So instead of thinking about, hey, how is the algorithm, like what changes are happening on our site? How is it different this year than last year? I think sites are often too just, me focused, or instead a lot of times there's benefit to say, oh, hey, like what are competitors doing? Maybe they have been working on EAT initiatives for the past year, and we've just been completely disregarding that because in the short term, we weren't seeing them get many visibility gains. But now, all at once, Google has rewarded that activity, right? So I think that's a change of perspective of how to view algorithm updates, right? Is not just looking at like, what are we doing wrong, but what are competitors doing right?
That's a great conclusion. And just before we move to the Q&A section, which is supposed to start in 1 minute, can each of you give his preferential one source to be informed regarding algorithm updates? You can say Twitter, obviously.
So from my point of view, any kinds of possible change, I believe they are already written in the SEO by the sea.com. Many years I am reading there. I will suggest you to read that place too. And if you want to just have some provision for any kinds of possibility, you can read there, and you can also read Go Fish Digital website too. Bill has many articles there too. Also, you can read articles of Cindy as well. I believe, I can tell that fundamental articles you can find there. We already mentioned one of the artworks already. And from my point, I can give these examples.
I always go to Twitter, and Marie Haynes and Lily Ray do great jobs writing up the changes. If we're looking at smaller changes or tests, it's usually like Brody Clark and Glenn Gabe. And of course, you know, there are a lot of people reporting on it with the Mozcast kinds of things. I really like Advanced Web Rankings has something that shows line graphs of the inclusion of different kinds of features in search results over time. So seeing how that changes, it's not necessarily an update per se, but it is a change. And sometimes those do change quite quickly with updates. And then, of course, watching out when the Googlers tweet, if John Mueller's tweeting or if Dan Sullivan's tweeting, they often will be pretty transparent about if there's been an update, and they'll at least try and hint at what's going to be impacted and why.
Chris, some tips for the audience or colleagues, by the way?
Yeah, definitely. So I think a hidden piece of information that people maybe don't talk about enough for algorithm updates is Google actually has guidelines specifically on how creators should approach the product review algorithm updates. And it's like one of the only places I know where Google says like, hey, we've released these algorithm updates. Here are like more specific actions that you can actually take. It's actually a little bit more specific than just write quality content. It talks about, hey, showcase how you're an expert in that product. Prove that you actually reviewed that product, right? So get like original data, custom graphics. Like the biggest problem that Google has with like product reviews, so like, you know, best cast iron skillets or something like that, it's very hard for it to know whether they actually reviewed the products or not. So Google has outlined all of these specific guidelines around like what product review articles you can specifically do. We dove really deep with this when we were working with Business Insider and their product reviews content. But you can extrapolate that to the rest of the web, right? Like it doesn't have to just be about products. Like show why you're an expert in your particular area. Oh, you're writing about, you know, Shopify site speed. Like use original data to show that you just didn't find this information from the rest of the SERPs. You know, Bill Slosky also talked about the concept of information gain scores, where you add into the search results that no other document in SERPs is using. So I think I can post it in the thread, but looking at the product reviews guidelines can give you insight onto what types of things Google is looking for not just product reviews, but all industries.
I'm also going to throw out Barry Schwartz, just because he knows everything like immediately when it happens, or at least seems to, so he can tell you when things are new, or usually when they're not new and they've already been tested or happened. And that's for smaller changes rather than updates, but he also writes about updates, and he writes when there's a suspected update. And so he's usually just right on top of it. So he probably deserves a lot of credit.
So that's perfect. I mean, we were supposed to start the Q&A 3 minutes ago, but considering the value of what you guys have been sharing to the crowd, I wanted to push a little bit. But thanks a lot for all of your answers on this kind of passionating and topics that could be discussed for hours. So now it's time for the audience to ask questions they want you guys to address and maybe give a bit of light on this topic for them. So we are ready to receive any questions via the chat, of course. So guys, please feel free to ask our panel, and if not, I will maybe have one question to ask. Oh yeah, who is the person you were mentioning, Cindy, regarding being up to date on any slight or minor change that could happen?
His name is Barry Schwartz, and I'll put his Twitter link in the chat. He also goes by Rusty Brick, but he writes for a lot of the online digital marketing publications, and he's just really on top of it.
So any questions from the audience, viewers?
I guess they're happy.
I have questions if the viewers don't have questions.
Oh. There is a question regarding CD's comment. Do you use search volatility trackers? Do you think they are reliable?
I think that they all take into account things a little bit differently, and none of them is crawling as extensively as Google is, or monitoring, I guess you should say. But when they're all kind of directionally going the same way, that tells me that something has changed. So if one says something and none of the others do, then I think it's a fluke and maybe a data problem. But when they're all kind of showing volatility, then yeah, I trust that.
So you need a consensus to trust this. Okay.
Just a bit of a consensus.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that. I would say just some like short-term data points. You know, you might drive yourself crazy by checking Mozcast every day or something, and Google does make plenty of changes. So it's possible that yes, the SERPs, you know, they rose that day, but maybe there wasn't an update necessarily because of that, just because there's more fluctuations in the search engines that day or something like that. You know, if you're using that to like verify, hey, we're seeing major visibility changes on our end. We've seen, you know, a 20% uptick in rankings or a 28% decline. Let's go back and check, you know, multiple of the SERP tracking tools. Then that can be used to validate your data. It's just kind of Cindy was talking about, hey, yes, multiple are seeing this, and then our own internal data matches up with that. We can be a little bit more confident now that, hey, maybe this was due to an algorithm update because the timelines are matching up really well.
So I have another question. I don't know if you wanted to add something else, Koray, on this volatility and search trackers, but Sophie Walker is asking if 2 weeks after an update is still a good length of time to assess the impact of the confirmed update.
So from my point of view, I can give an example from the SEO A/B tests. From my point of view, I would wait like 6 weeks at least. If I perform an SEO A/B test, I usually choose like at least 30% or 35% of the URLs. Then I wait for 6 weeks to be sure that the results are definitive. And when it comes to the updates, if it is a broad core algorithm update, usually during the rollout, it can reverse it back. And sometimes even after, even if the rollout has been finished, after the rollout or after the update in 5 days or 6 days, it can reverse its effect again. So if the update has been completed and after 2 weeks, probably you will have the reflection of your next 5 months or 4 months, until the next core algorithm update, probably you will have the same scale of ranking or the same range of rankings if there is not a fundamental change. So 2 weeks, most probably it will be good enough. It is a broad core algorithm update, but sometimes we are having an extra update too, like a new algorithm comes in and it changes things again. If there is not such a situation, if it is a silent era, yeah, 2 weeks will be good enough in this context.
I think
Chris?
2 weeks.
Cindy? Yeah, okay.
I usually will start watching things pretty quickly, but to make a full assessment, I think 2 weeks is a good starting time period. But then again, yeah, you need to check it again in 6 weeks because, like I said, things don't always, even when it's finished rolling out, it hasn't necessarily finished changing. So it should be just part of an ongoing thing. If you think you might have been impacted, then you should be looking at it at least weekly. and assessing what you think is going on and developing a theory.
And I think the thing is it's hard to change strategy, especially like the bigger your organization is. Like if you're an in-house team where everything needs to go through a dev queue and you have content creators that have like a content calendar, like if making a change based on an algorithm update with only like a week or two's worth of data, unless you're just very confident that, you were impacted by that, I would agree that it's like, minimum, 4 weeks, but 6 to 8 is probably even better, to really get a true understanding of what the impact was, what the final results were, not that you just lost visibility for a day or two and then quickly regained it as the update finished rolling out. Like, I know it can be difficult during an algorithm update, once again, especially when things aren't going well, but, staying firm in your strategy, being patient, waiting for the data to collect. And then, if you're going to change strategy, ensuring that you have enough data to, you wrangle internal resources to go and actually be able to act on that change if you are adjusting strategy at all. But I would definitely wait as long as you is a good amount of time, 4 to 8 weeks before making that decision, because it can be daunting for a lot of internal teams to do that.
That's perfect. We don't have many time, but there are 2 more questions that popped, and I don't want to arbitrarily choose one, so I'm going to take the first one that came chronologically speaking. Do you think a sharp decline in mobile page experience data through GSC that aligns with an algo update is an indicator that the site has been affected despite there are no changes in traffic?
Can you say the beginning part of the question? A sharp decline in mobile experience?
Yeah, in page experience data that is aligned with an algo update is an indicator that the site has been affected by an algorithm update despite no changes in traffic. Some way, is there a correlation, straight correlation in changes we can see in page experience data and ranking impact? I guess this is the question.
Yeah, if you see a sharp decline in mobile page experience, but you're not seeing a sharp decline in traffic, number one, I would wonder, where are you looking at your traffic, and are you segmenting mobile traffic from desktop? Because potentially, sometimes in Search Console, they use what's called sampling. They don't give you all of the clicks. You might need to go to a separate tool like Google Analytics and then segment out your mobile traffic and see, was there actually a decline in mobile traffic? Don't just look at everything all at once. And then if still you're convinced that there's no impact on traffic when you have a sharp decline in Search Console mobile page experience, then you should take it as a warning, as maybe your traffic hasn't dropped off yet, but Google sees that there's a problem with your mobile page experience, and they may be giving you the warning where it's time to work on it now so that you don't see that traffic drop off. But that's never something that you want to see.
I think it's a pretty accurate and clear question, guys. If it's okay, I'm going to ask the last one, and maybe Chris and Koray will answer it. How do you separate the impact of an algorithm update versus regular seasonality when historical seasonality becomes irrelevant? As Valentin says, post-pandemic, many businesses see very different activity versus historical due to the pent-up demand. So maybe it gets complex to assess what used to be historical versus now, and when you take specific eyes on algorithm updates.
So here actually you can just check the search trends data, and if you see that the search trends change, you can assume that actually it is because of the search behavior changes. But sometimes both of them can happen at the same time too. So in this case, if you see some algorithm update signals from the trackers or the SERP trackers, and at the same time, you can also see some query search behavior differences too. But I can tell that if the meaning of the query has changed in the perception of the user, Google will be able to pick it up way much later, because let's say a politician has used a certain types of word, it means that the politician's name and that phrase will be searched together, and it might happen first time in the history of the search. So it's not that easy for search engine to see that, okay, these two are being searched together because of this event or this occasion. It might happen very much later. So usually, to be able to understand these perspective changes, intent changes, or behavior changes, it requires more data. And that's why if you see certain types of ranking changes, and if it is correlating with other industries or other types of queries, and if it is a site-wide change, it should be an algo update. If you think that it is because of the seasonality, you can always validate it from the Google Trends or different types of places too, because even if you are in the first page, before your skepticism and after your skepticism, probably you will have more impression. Even if you don't check the trends data, since there are more search activity, you will have more impressions too. And if there are more impressions, search engine also can trigger different types of search features there as well. So I will compare your rankings to the other industries and also the trend data.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd say check your rankings, right? Like rankings are in this situation, using it as your primary KPI can be helpful because rankings are independent of seasonality generally. Like rankings won't go up or down because it's summer or winter or pre or post pandemic, right? So you can take a look and say, hey, first, are my rankings the same? Okay, yes, they are, but traffic is down. Now that's an indication that it might be search demand, right? Because my visibility, my market share, that's all static, but traffic conversions are down. Maybe then I go into, check Google Trends as Koray was talking about. However, if you see, hey, I look at my rankings are down and my traffic or conversions are down, then that starts to line up more with an algorithm update where we've seen visibility and potential loss of traffic as a result of that loss of visibility. But one of the nice things about rankings is they're consumer demand independent. So you can use those as a proxy to determine, hey, is it a problem with my consumers or my market or a problem with my specific visibility on this platform?
Well, guys, I think it closes today's episode. First, I want to thank you all for the 6 extra minutes you gave to the show, to the crowd, and to the global SEO knowledge, way to more knowledge. On behalf of the whole team, of course. The recording of the webinar will be sent to you viewers in a few days, so keep an eye out. And yeah, that's a wrap for day 2 of the SEO Kitchen Show. We'll see you tomorrow for the 3rd and final day of the competition with another amazing recipes like steamed content and technical SEO, sweet and sour e-commerce, and SEO and data science cookies with chocolate. That's all. Koray, Chris, Cindy, it was a pleasure to be with you there today. I did learn lots of things, and I hope I'll be there for another webinar in the near future. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of the day, and we
Thanks so
talk
much.
in the future. Bye to all.